I'm John Nielsen-Gammon. I'm a professor of atmospheric sciences at Texas A&M University. I'm also the Texas state climatologist and director of the Southern Regional Climate Center. Generally speaking, heavy rainfall is a risk throughout the United States. Obviously, there's lots of differences in how much rainfall occurs in different locations, but our systems for dealing with rainfall are calibrated to that. So in a place like Houston, you've got large rainfall intensities. Storm systems are designed to deal with large intensity rainfall. A place like Phoenix, where heavy rainfall is more rare, the storm systems have a smaller capacity. So in a sense, the threat of exceeding capacity produces flooding is similar in most cities around the United States, even though the climates are so different. We looked at the 4 major metropolitan areas in Texas and looked at the individual storms hitting them, broken down by storm type to sort out potential different influences. So we found the individual convective storms were indeed enhanced in cities, but the other storm types were not. Instead, we found sort of different behaviors depending on the type of storm. For cold fronts and mesoscale convective systems coming down from the north or northwest, they tended to weaken as they moved over cities, whereas warm frontal precipitation and especially tropical storm-related storms saw an enhancement of very high intensity rainfall, especially lower down in the atmosphere. So rather than making a blanket statement about rainfall in cities, we found the picture is actually a bit more nuanced. The impacts of cities depends upon what's driving the rainfall in the first place. Well, cities in some sense are an obstacle, sort of like mountain ranges. You've got skyscrapers in the middle of some, but more importantly, the buildings and such provide additional roughness on the ground surface, so that slows down the air, can force it to ascend or move around cities. That's one mechanism by which cities can affect rainfall. Another is the temperature difference between urban and rural areas. Cities are typically warmer. We call this the urban heat island. And so that could potentially lead to greater instability for convection over cities than over the surrounding countryside. Cities have been the focus of precipitation studies for many years. There was some pioneering work studying rainfall around St. Louis in the early 1970s, and that seemed to indicate enhancement of rainfall in the city and in downwind areas. Subsequent studies have found different effects in different locations, but it's been kind of hard to sort things out. People tend to perceive that cities inhibit rainfall, and actually that's true of people just about everywhere. They often ask me, why do storms seem to go around them rather than hitting them? And of course that can't happen everywhere. So, and when we look at average rainfall totals, we don't see that sort of effect in cities or in the surrounding countryside. So that seems to be people's impression because they're expecting a storm that exists to hit them as it's moving toward them. But storm lifetimes, particularly thunderstorms, are often just a half hour to an hour long. So if you see it coming, it may actually be likely not to hit you. Well, the most dangerous types of rain events for urban areas are the ones that produce very intense rainfall, because that sort of rainfall runs off quickly and can potentially overwhelm sewer systems and urban creeks and streams and culverts. So most of the flooding we see in Texas in urban areas is rainfall that happens very quickly. An example of that would be the flooding in May in San Antonio of 2025, when a creek overflowed and swept away several cars, and unfortunately 13 people lost their lives in that event. Storms like Hurricane Harvey, where there's long-term widespread rainfall, are actually quite rare. That's why Harvey was so unusual. Usually, if rainfall is happening over a long period, there's enough time for it to run off rather than accumulate. For people, you have risks not just from flooding, but also from the storms itself. Lightning causes a lot of deaths, and so there's a risk of being caught outside when a storm develops. One thing we found in our study was that individual thunderstorm events or localized events tend to develop more frequently over cities than in the surrounding rural areas. And that's dangerous because people may be waiting to hear thunder or see lightning before they take protective action. But if the first thunderbolt is more likely to happen in the city, then that produces a greater risk for people.